Hi, Scott. Good to have you back on Peopleizer. Welcome back.
Hi, Julian. Yeah, it's been a while.
So, okay, we're gonna do the part two of your interview, and let's give back a little bit of context to the people who've been watching part one. So, you are Korean American. You used to live
hmm
in Paris for 10 years. We did the interview in October 2022, and then you moved to Italy. You decided to leave Paris after 10 years there. To go to Italy, and if I recall, the area of Lombardy.
Yeah,
Um, the first interview was pretty interesting. We discussed the different things, option. You mentioned to us that you actually spent 3 to 4 years traveling, going around, be it Portugal, Italy, Switzerland, UK, to check
yeah.
the place and see what's okay, what's not okay for you. We also talk about communities, the local value of the people, and all this stuff. So it will be very interesting now to hear how is it going for you.
So it's been about 9, 10 months since I moved. So yeah, just under a
So,
year.
so where did
Frank.
you move to? You actually moved to
Yeah,
Lombardy, right?
yeah. I'm actually in Milan finally.
Milan.
In
Okay.
so sort of the capital of Lombardy. Yeah. It feels like I've been here a lot longer than that. Time has gone by quite quickly. What can I say? I mean, for the most part, I'd say it's what I expected. I mean, yeah, I can't say there were any huge surprises. I did my homework pretty well coming in. But the one sort of, I guess, surprise that I can say is that, like, what's the best way to put this? Like, so Italy, like, I would say living here, I have the impression everything that's sort of government administration, all of that is frankly a bit dysfunctional. It's not necessarily terribly worse than frankly what I deal with now when I go back to France, occasionally for business or whatnot. But the thing is, here it's not just that sort of the state is sort of dysfunctional. It's really that a lot of people don't actually sort of accept the authority of the state deep down. Not like in many other countries. There's always sort of this passive,
Hmm.
almost
How does
like.
that translate? Can you give us example? Because it's we understand what you're saying, but how does that translate on a daily basis? What do you see that get you to say that?
So compared to say compared to say France or Germany or many other parts of Europe, for the most part the other parts of Europe, if there's a rule, if there's a law, if there's a regulation, people might complain but they default to sort of following it. Here in Italy, a lot of people, and I've seen this mentality also in the former Eastern Europe, European countries, former communist Warsaw Pact countries, because of their very peculiar legacy. People default almost to being very suspicious, almost doing what they want, almost trying to subvert the rules. So it's almost like a default behavior. People are like, we don't really trust the state. We're going to like sort of ignore this, and you see this sort of everywhere. You see this even in terms of driving. You see this even in like daily interactions at the shop. I mean, you see this in the way people talk about government, people talk about news. It's very visible. It's very, yeah.
Hmm. Okay. And do you think that this trust is actually good or bad? Does that even
It's
make
good
sense
and
to
bad.
us?
It's good and bad, and that's what I realized is the surprise for me. The surprise is that even me, and I think I was a lot more, let's say, a lot more aware of this than most people. But even for me, it is a surprise to see, let's say, so like I would say here, what I'm realizing is that at a certain point, having sort of a society that doesn't trust in the state, a state that doesn't really function very well, there's also a lot of downside to it because, as it turns out, living in France, living even in the US, I had forgotten just how much of a role the state actually plays in
Hmm.
everyone's lives, and how
So
certain
downsides
norms and
like
traditions.
what?
So basically, everything here, I mean, so, for instance, earlier today, so this is okay, not really an example of the state, but it's sort of an example of the mentality of how people have. So I wanted to, so I was writing. Actually, I spent the weekend in the countryside, not far, somewhere between Tuscany and Genova. So basically on the coast. It was very nice. And on the ride back today, I wanted to stop somewhere for lunch, and I discovered that in Italy, first of all, Google Maps is not that reliable. And it's not because places aren't marked, it's because people don't really use it. So the information is not necessarily up to date.
Mm.
The second thing is you call and people often don't pick up. People don't actually use social media oftentimes. People don't necessarily answer messages. It's really like, and so I physically went there and I discovered, and so the place I went to today was basically it's a very Italian concept called an agriturismo. It's like a farm that also does like a B&B that also like sells food and like is a little shop. It's very, very popular here. And so I went there and it was a very Italian experience because it was technically closed, but then the woman inside came out and she was like, "Oh, like, what do you want?" And I was like, "Oh, I wanted to eat here. I noticed on Google you have like 4.8 stars for like 600 reviews. Like, it seemed like a great place to eat." And she said, "Oh, we're closed." And I was like, "Okay, but can I at least buy some cheese because this is the home region of Parmesan?" And she said, "Okay, then come inside." And then it was very like, basically, like there are no clear rules, and the
Mm.
only way you could have known is if you had been there before.
Mm.
You know, and like that's how it works for almost everything. And this is like it's the same thing even to get. So about a week and a half ago I got some vaccines because I'm supposed to travel internationally soon and I have to get typhoid and some exotic vaccines. And so for that, that's the International Vaccine Center. And I discovered again, like to go there and go through that process, like to be fair, it was actually quite fast. It wasn't expensive, it was done well. I can't complain about that. But the process of getting the appointment, like checking into the clinic, everything, it was very like, let's say, unsystematic. It's not to say it was impossible. It's just that like you shouldn't go there expecting there to be clear rules and procedures.
Mm.
Today, what happens might be different from what happens tomorrow.
Okay.
And that is just how people live. Everything is non-standard. Everything is bespoke in a way. It's very
Mm.
artisanal, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So this, yeah, it might not be too bad in a context where you've got growing control and growing infrastructure of control. There's something that also people pay attention to. Do you have this same feeling of digital control that you have that is being basically
They
implemented
try.
in France?
I mean, they try here, but like I would say, I mean, digital control get people to obey basic speeding rules first.
Mm.
You know, like I would say it's like, wow, you digital control. That's like trying to run a marathon and here people can barely walk. It's like digital control. What are you talking about? I barely have like a functioning 4G signal in many parts of the country. so
Okay.
so no, I mean I'm not worried about that. But then the downside is like things are just not standardized. Like you can have an amazing like artisanal like deal here, but if you go to the next province, it's totally different. And nobody will explain. You just have to go and start talking to people in Italian. So it's very, yeah, it's interesting, but it's a slower, different way of life. Like here,
Mm.
you have to make friends with people. You have to take the time to talk to them. You have to learn how to do small talk, because otherwise, I mean, yeah, it's like society 100 years ago. If you don't know how to behave and assimilate into society, at least on a basic level, you will just not be able to get basic needs met.
Mm. Okay. And so in terms of location, I suspect you were aiming at a large city like Milan, or you wanted to go more to the countryside initially?
I mean, I was fine with either. I mean, I came here for personal reasons and also Italy, frankly. So again, like finding a place to live is also quite difficult in Italy
Because of?
because again, it's very artisanal. It's bespoke. There's not really an industrial approach.
Okay.
So everything, if you want something like international industrial standardized in Italy, then you pay because that's considered something for foreigners. But if you want something like reasonably priced, like a local, then everything is like bespoke. You have to call and maybe go and visit grandma at the apartment and talk about your family and talk about what is a beautiful apartment. And then grandma will be like, okay, I like you. So screw the 6 other people who are supposed to view this. I'm giving it to you. That's how it works.
Okay.
So yeah, so when I first moved here, I didn't speak Italian to that level. I didn't know that necessarily like how to speak to people like that, how to sort of build that trust. So I mean, it was too difficult. So I found an apartment, ironically enough, through a friend, which is the most Italian way to find an apartment. But I think now I could probably do this. But yeah, it's really like word of mouth. It's super, super old school.
Okay. So the type of okay. So to go to Italy, the mindset you need to adopt is really something flexible, right? Basically, if you are
Yeah.
rigid, forget about it.
No. If you're rigid, if you're rule driven, if you think that time is linear and everything will be done, according to rules, procedures, regulations, and schedules, then no,
Mm,
this is not the country
yeah.
for you.
That's not
But if
this.
you're open-minded, like it's beautiful. Like if you're open-minded, you can sometimes say, "Hey, I'm going to the supermarket," and like I don't know. Instead, 2 hours later, you'll be like, "Okay, I didn't plan to go to like a Sicilian traditional food market, but okay, that's nice. This is nicer than the supermarket. Like that's the spirit you have to enjoy living
From a work perspective, I recall that you were freelancing in Paris, right? So
here."
were you able to continue the same activity? What's going on
Yeah,
here?
yeah. So work-wise, yeah, work-wise, I'm still freelancing now. I'm freelancing for a large American tech company actually, working mostly in Germany and Switzerland. Like the local job market here, it exists, but again, I'm not like a master enough of Italy to crack that yet.
Mm.
Again, that's like what I just mentioned with like the countryside, the apartment, everything on steroids. Like that's like you crack like the two bosses. This is like the master level boss. This is Donkey Kong throwing like flaming barrels at you. That level.
So from a work perspective, the transition was seamless, right? Basically, you just continue the same activity, everything was fine. It's not like you need to find a job locally or something like that.
No, no, and in
So
fact, I mean, I know friends who are job hunting locally. Like it's quite hard. It is very, very hard. Even if you're Italian, it's very, very hard. If you're international, I'm not sure you'll find much at all.
okay. So it's mostly local company, local organizations, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's local companies, but so that it goes back to sort of a paradox of Italy in general, which is basically this is like a dual economy. So if you work for a large company, then everything you earn is declared, everything you earn is on paper and everything. And the issue with that is that everything if it's declared properly, then you end up paying similar tax rates to France and Germany.
Yeah.
But you earn less and cost of living is high. So financially, be careful. It means you might actually end up living almost in working poverty.
Mm.
So that's what happens if you work for like the large official companies. A lot of people end up working for smaller companies or they own their own businesses or whatnot. And there, the very common thing that happens is the company will pay you like an official salary that's declared, but it's going to be minimal. And then they'll find other ways to sort of, pay you under the table if you. It's very, very common practice in this country. And people do it. And sort of even the government, I think, they know about it. And for the most part, they, oftentimes they'll look the other way essentially in practice compared to other
Mm.
countries in Europe, simply because they realize, hey, like if we crack out on these people, these small businesses will close.
Yeah,
And it's a
that's
dual
a good
economy.
point. In what I
Yeah,
see also across different countries in Europe, right? Basically, the
yeah.
official and the unofficial way of doing things, definitely.
Yeah, and that there's a very very big yeah, the unofficial economy here, the unofficial way of doing things, it predates the Italian state. I don't think it will disappear anytime soon. It's quite active, and this is quite different compared to say France, where actually sure there are people who do things unofficially, but in France it's actually quite small compared to say a country like Italy, the size of the unofficial economy. You know? So yeah, again, like you see this dual economy functioning, and it's quite strange. That's why sometimes you see some very strange behaviors that don't really make sense in other parts of the world.
Right.
So yeah,
Let's move toward your integration. How did it go with the local folks?
learn Italian.
Learn
It's not
Italian?
really a choice.
Okay, how did you do that?
Well, they don't give you a choice. They just
No,
mostly don't speak
yeah,
English.
but from a very
Yeah.
practical perspective, you start learning before you move there, or and
Well,
do you take private lessons, whatever?
I took so before I moved, I took maybe I don't know, maybe 5-10 hours of private lessons. I didn't have a lot of time.
Okay.
I practiced a bit with some language apps, but truth be told, for me, I know Spanish and French, and so it wasn't that difficult. I could read signs, I could read many things already. I could understand a lot, so it was really okay. Like I can
Mm.
tell what that means. Now I just need to repeat what the guy said, and yeah, so you just jump in. But again, you don't have a choice here.
Okay.
Right?
And being able to speak a bit of the language has fast track your integration. Did it, or
I
it
mean,
really?
fast track is an understatement. If you don't speak the language here, I would say Italy's. If you don't speak Italian, I think it's marginally easier than trying to live in a country like Japan speaking only English. which is quite unusual. Considering that we're in Western Europe, this is quite unusual to have that level of sort of gap. But here, if you don't speak Italian, just many things are impossible. Many things are just closed to you. Many things like you get a very different experience and often different prices. So yeah, like that's step zero. Speak Italian. But the good news is nobody speaks English and nobody will try to speak English for the most part. They'll just say, "Oh, it looks like you understand what I'm saying, so I'll keep speaking in Italian." And eventually you do understand what they're saying.
Yeah, I love those countries where they keep talking to you in the local language, even if you don't
Yeah.
understand. It's pretty common behavior, especially in Asia. Um, is there something that you don't like about your new setup? Is something that
I mean, I would say I would say there's this. It's not so much that I don't like it, but I'm realizing that sometimes you do want that sort of simple standardized thing. So I mean the example I have for that is say for instance like yeah, like McDonald's. Let's say you're somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you're feeling like sick or tired, whatever. Sometimes you just want to go eat at McDonald's because it's something comforting. It's homogenous. It's all across the planet. And what I'm realizing is that living here, like I love living here, but sometimes there are moments where it's like, I'm tired and I wish I didn't have to go and like try to like become friends with like the old like grandma who runs the restaurant to have like a proper meal.
Hmm.
Or like sometimes like it's a little bit annoying, and that's when I realize like I'm not from this culture.
Hmm.
There are many things I appreciate, there are many things I enjoy, but certain things are just very different from where I'm sort of originally from, and so that's where sometimes it's a bit frustrating. um to be fair though, I mean that is becoming already, even after 9 months, that's becoming less and less the case. I think I'm
Yeah, it's
assimilating pretty
more of
quickly.
nice to have,
Yeah,
and especially if you live
yeah,
in the US for some time, you are used to standardization, right? Where you can access
yeah,
any McDonald's or
yeah.
whatever
Here's the
fast food.
opposite. There is no
Yeah,
standardization. Do
yeah,
not expect any standardization.
which is not bad as well. Yeah. So what's your perspective there now?
Perspective in what sense?
Staying in Italy, exploring more. I recall that you also were curious maybe about the other country, right? Like Croatia and all.
I mean, to be honest, I'm pretty happy here for now. Let's say short to medium run, because long term, like nobody knows, but short to medium term, I mean, I'm happy to stay here. It's a very, I mean, it's one of those countries where, so living here, to be honest, I don't feel the need or particularly the desire to go on long distance trips.
Mhm.
I don't really want to fly anymore. I don't really want to go like even to Paris, even if I have to visit friends or business
But
and people.
why? Because you have access to actually diversity around Milan, or
No, because actually I don't miss it.
okay.
Honestly, like I'm very, very comfortable here. It's a very high quality of life, and high quality of life, not in the sense of, oh, like you live in Vienna and the trams are always on time. I mean, I don't give a shit about that. But it's a high quality of life in the sense of it's sunny, like outside, like there's beautiful nature, people are friendly. I can say all the bad things I want about Italian administration. I've never had an Italian bureaucrat scream at me in anger the way that many say French bureaucrats have.
Mm,
That just doesn't happen here. If you do that, that is just unforgivable. That is unacceptable. That's when people do notice.
mm,
And so it's just a nice place to stay, and that's where it's interesting. Yeah, because ever since I moved here, I travel a lot less, and if I do, it's really locally or regionally.
yeah. Good point about the weather. I was going to miss that. How is the weather there? Do you like it? Is it what to
It gets
expect?
hot. It gets hot, and so especially in the summer, it's quite hot. In the summer, it goes up to nowadays like 37, 38 for weeks at a time. You need air conditioning. In the winter, it's a bit cold, but nothing like Northern Europe. And you never have like days and days of rain. You never have like UK or Netherlands style like drizzle all the time. Here, for instance, we have a storm today, but it's the type of storm where like parts of the road actually start flooding.
Mm,
So you have to watch out or your car hydroplanes. But that type of storm, it will pass in like 2 hours and it's gone. And then like 3, 4 hours later, if you're lucky, it's sunny again. Water has all disappeared. So it's really, yeah, the weather is nice. I mean, it's hot. It's humid. There's mosquitoes, but you know that's also just like this region is quite known for this. Milan, like this part of northern Italy, is quite known for it. Other parts of Italy are just hot, but maybe less humid, etc. Like Milan is not known for great summers.
Okay. All right. Anything else to add for the audience? Because we covered already some ground, but if you think I forgot something or something that they should know.
I mean, mostly I would say after moving here, it's really, I'd say the biggest reflection is really what do you want, like before you go. So here, I mean, so here I've been here before, I've traveled before. I knew that moving here, it would be a step, it would be a different step. It would be different in the sense of it's sort of the opposite of moving to a place like London or New York. You're choosing for a slower life.
Yep.
In almost like the past. I mean, you know, it's going to be more, I mean, you can call it, some people would call it provincial, other people would call it old fashioned. I mean, I my favorite word is really artisanal. Like there's a lot of artisanship here. And it's amazing to see that this like still exists in today's world, because honestly, many parts of the world you go now and it's like artisans, like what are you talking about? There's an H&M on every corner. It's the same crap all the way from Shanghai to Sydney. Here, no, like there's actually an old man who's still making shoes by hand. And this is like normal. And so actually that's a choice. And so for me, I'm happy with my choice. I'm happy with living sort of a slower life, essentially going more local, like in many ways, actually, it sounds bad maybe to say, but I would say it's a bit maybe less cosmopolitan. But mostly what I'm realizing is also cosmopolitan is sort of overrated. I mean, why do I need to follow all these trends? Why do I need to be aware? Why do I need to eat vegan avocado toast? You know, if I'm happy eating my mozzarella burrata that's been, you know, part of this country's cuisine for centuries, then, you know, if I'm happy and it's not killing me, then what's the issue? Let me enjoy it. It's a life well lived as well. Like that's what I'm realizing. But I would say like that's not for everyone. Like I think, yeah, that's where really like stop and think. And this is the type of thing where if you look at the locals and how they live, so again, like leave like the city center, leave like the fancy hotel, go into like the local areas and see how people live. That's where you can pick up on this and, you know, sort of determine, is this for me or not? So
yeah, that's why the strategy to maybe spend a few weeks there, it's make total sense, right? Before you even decide to make the move. All right, that's great. And just a closing remark is I think the world is going more provincial, more local. So you are actually on the right trend. It's not about living in London or New York or San Francisco anymore. It's about going more local into provincial area where time goes to a bit less fast, but better quality of life, definitely.
Yeah. And these are the things you appreciate on a daily basis, you know, like living in New York, living in London, you eat your Michelin star restaurant, you buy an iPhone, whatever, but that's like what, once a week maximum. I prefer having the sunlight and, you know, the simple joys of like a, you know, neighborhood bakery that bakes their own focaccia.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Scott. It was great to talk to you. Great to know that everything is going fine for you, and good luck for the next adventure, whatever's come next.
Thank you. Happy to share.